In today's episode, I'm going to talk about what it is, what the amount looks like for different types of returns, and then we're going to talk about how you can potentially have that penalty removed. Okay, so let's get right into it. The failure to file penalty is exactly what it sounds like. It's a penalty that the IRS assesses to taxpayers who fail to file their tax return. Now, this does not apply if you filed a timely extension. A timely extension means that it was filed and received or acknowledged by the IRS by the original return's due date.
Welcome to the Tax Relief with Timalyn podcast. Are you behind on taxes? Is the IRS threatening you or your business? Are you overwhelmed and confused about how to resolve your tax issues? Let's join Timalyn as she explains your options and how she may be able to help. Timalyn Bowens is America's favorite EA.
Hey, family. Welcome to episode 55 of the Tax Relief with Timalyn Bowens podcast. Check this out. Tax season is approaching so quickly, and you may not have everything that you need to file an accurate return on time. If that's the case, please make sure that you file a tax extension instead of just waiting to file it later. Because if you end up owing this year and you don't file an extension on time and you don't get the tax return in on time, you may be subject to what we call the failure to file penalty. Now, this penalty can be huge, up to 25% of the tax assessed return. And I've talked about it in almost all of the previous episodes, but I've never spent a full episode dedicated to talking about the failure to file penalty. So that's exactly what we're going to do in today's episode. I'm going to talk about what it is, what the amount looks like for different types of returns, and then we're going to talk about how you can potentially have that penalty removed. Okay, so let's get right into it. The failure to file penalty is exactly what it sounds like. It's a penalty that the IRS assesses to taxpayers who fail to file their tax return. Now, this does not apply if you filed a timely extension. A timely extension means that it was filed and received or acknowledged by the IRS by the original return's due date. So, for example, your 2024 tax return, if you're an individual, is going to be April 15th of 2025. So, if you file an extension, which is Form 4868, by April 15th, you have filed a timely extension. This extension is going to give you an additional 6 months to get that return filed. I do want to point out, it's only an extension to file, not to pay, which is why when you file your tax extension, the IRS would like for you to figure out, in a way, it doesn't have to be perfect, an estimate of what your tax liability is going to be, all right? So that you can make whatever payment is needed with the extension. So when we're looking at this and you have the extension, you only have the additional 6 months. If you miss that deadline, you could still be subject to the failure to file penalty. You'll know that you owe this penalty because the IRS will send you a notice letting you know. Now, there is not a set amount because the penalty is based on 5% of the tax due for each month that is late. Now, good for taxpayers, this amount is going to cap at 25%. But 25% is still huge. If you've been listening to the podcast, you know that when I talk about the failure to file penalty for individuals or corporations, I give the example of a taxpayer owing $10,000. Well, if the failure to file penalty is maxed out, that penalty is going to be $2,500, meaning the total balance is now $12,500, with $2,500 of that being penalty alone. To make it worse, let's say you had a stellar year in your business and now you have a tax bill of $100,000. If you filed your tax return late, you would be looking at $25,000 of just a failure to file penalty, which can be crucial. Okay. So when we're looking at how they calculate it, again, everybody's is going to be a little bit different, but they're looking at the tax that is shown on the return. And then, of course, remember, everybody has a tax liability. It's going to be at the top of page 2 of your 1040. Then they're going to go ahead and subtract any credits that you had, the non-refundable and the refundable, and then any withholding that you had done or estimated tax payments. Whatever that balance is what's going to be multiplied by the 5% a month. So the balance is going to be at the bottom of page 2 of your 1040, where it says the amount that you owe. Now, with this, for all returns after 12/31/2024, this is for individuals filing a 1040 or for corporations, the minimum penalty is going to be $510. Okay. And this comes into play if the return is more than 60 days late. All right. So they give you that little bit of grace if you are 2 months late, and they say, hey, even though this is late, we're going to max you at 510, or not max you, but your minimum is going to be 510. Now, with that, the minimum penalty is the amount listed that I just said, 510, or 100% of the underpayment, whichever is less. So let's say that the amount owed that your balance shows is less than 510, then that means the penalty that they're going to assess you is going to be that amount. So if it was $400 that you owed for not filing, that was your balance when you filed late, then your penalty would be that $400. But if the amount of your underpayment is more than 510, the minimum penalty would be the 510. Okay. Now, when we are looking at the failure to file and the failure to pay penalties, the failure to pay penalty is going to be 0.5% for each month. Okay. And that is going to reduce what the failure to file penalty is to 4.5%. Pretty much, if you filed over 5 months late, you're going to be looking at that 25% max. Okay. Now, what I just went over is for the 2024 tax year. If your return, you're filing 2023 now, the minimum penalty would be $485. 2022, the minimum payment would be $450. Okay. But hopefully you got all those caught up. If not, it would be remiss of me not to give you that information, right? Before we talk about how to remove it, let's go ahead and talk about partnership returns and S-Corps. Now, at this time, when this podcast episode is being released, we're already past the deadline for S-Corps and our partnerships. So typically it is 3/15. This year, if I'm remembering correctly, the deadline was 3/17 because 3/15 fell on a weekend. So 3/17 was the next business day. And for these, people get in trouble because they're like, well, the failure to file penalty is based on how much I owe. And with a partnership or an S-Corp, the tax flows through to the owners. So it doesn't matter if you file the S-Corp or the partnership return late. Folks, that is absolutely wrong. And in addition to that being wrong, not only are you going to be charged a failure to file penalty, you're going to be charged a failure to file penalty for each month, up to 12 months, and for each partner. So for the 2024 tax return, if we're looking at an 1120S for S-Corps, or if we are looking at a 1065 for partners, you are looking at a failure to file base penalty of $245 per partner per month. So again, this maxes out at 12 months. So let's say we have a one shareholder S-Corp, okay? The return gets filed a year late, so 12 months late, even though they may have had a loss in the business. Even though the S-Corp does not pay tax at the S-Corp level, they are going to get hit with a penalty of $2,940, even though it's a flow-through entity, because the failure to file rate for an S-Corp is $245 for each month. Now, this could be with an S-Corp or a partnership. Let's take into consideration if there are more shareholders, or with a partnership, you have more partners. It wouldn't be the $2,940. It would be $2,940 for each partner or shareholder. So let's say we have a 5-member partnership and the 2024 partnership gets filed late. We're taking the 245 times the 12 months, if it's a year late, times the 5 partners. That's going to be a failure to file penalty of $14,700. That is crazy. So I will urge you once again, make sure that you are getting your tax returns filed on time. If you are unable to get it filed on time, make sure you file a timely extension. Now, I have videos out on my YouTube channel to walk you through the process of filing a 4868 or to file a form 7004, 7004, however you want to refer to that. But unfortunately, again, when this podcast episode is being released, it's already too late for you S-Corp and partnership folks, okay? Unless you are in an area that has been declared a natural disaster by FEMA. So for example, I am located in Louisville, Kentucky. The whole state of Kentucky has been declared a federal disaster area because during the month of February, we had flooding, we had mudslides. So due to that, we have an automatic extension until November of 2025 to get our 2024 returns filed. If you're in Kentucky, that may be your saving grace. You can check the IRS website to see if the area that you're in has been declared as a federal disaster area. Okay. Now, there is one thing that we have that could be considered our get out of jail free card. Okay. Way back when I first started this podcast, I did some episodes about penalty abatement. The failure to file penalty is one that qualifies for penalty abatement. This means that you can have it removed or forgiven from your account transcript. There is first-time penalty abatement where you can just ask for it over the phone and it's done immediately and taken off the transcript. Then we have reasonable cause abatement, where based on Internal Revenue Code, you meet the criteria to have the penalty removed. I'll link both of those episodes down below, but here's the thing I want to let you know about first-time penalty abatement. If the 3 years prior to the one that you filed late were filed on time, you are likely going to qualify for first-time penalty abatement, and you just need to get on the phone with the automated collection service line and ask for it. Okay? Now that may sound easier said than done because nobody wants to wait on hold with the IRS. But if you're that 5-member partnership and you're facing that $14,700, I would say it's worth it, right? But if you don't qualify for first-time penalty abatement, don't give up because you do still potentially have options with reasonable cause abatement. I'm going to link those episodes below, like I said, so you can check them out. Because if it sounds like something you may be eligible for, maybe you don't want to do it yourself. Maybe you would like the assistance of a tax expert. You can always book a call to see if you're a good fit to work with my firm, Bowens Tax Solutions. I'll also link my contact information down below. But regardless of whether or not you work with me, make sure that you always get the help you need, okay? And if you're new here, I'm on a personal mission to fill the tax literacy gap. Sometimes people get beat up by penalties that they didn't even know were out there, and it's just because they didn't know any better. Will you do me a favor and help me in closing that literacy gap by sharing this podcast episode with everybody that you know, especially if they have an S-Corp or partnership? It would mean the world to me, and I promise you, if they can get those penalties removed, it'll mean the world to them too. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen today. I'd like to thank Jim Ray Consulting Services for helping me get this message out to you. I hope you found the information helpful. Did you know 1 in 50 people have a tax problem? Please share this episode with your friends and family because you never know who may need help. Again, thanks for listening. Hey, just as a reminder, this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. It provides a framework and possible solutions for solving your tax problems, but it is not legally binding. Please consult your tax professional regarding your specific tax situation.